Okay, now that the Carolina Hurricanes training camp is underway, I wanted to talk a little bit about the PTO situation. There's been a lot of discussion on the forums and questions as to why do we have 7 PTOs this year. Quite an interesting situation for sure. You know, you look back at the last couple of years, the Hurricanes have not done a lot in the PTO side. In fact, 20 and 21, they did not really have any PTOs. Last year, you might recall that the Canes had 3 PTOs. For sure, you'd remember Derek Stepan. Stepan was earmarked to join the Canes, and that's good news. He did, and I thought played well last year. Second on the list was Calvin DeHaan. DeHaan kind of was hoping for a contract before he came to camp, but he had to wait a little while to get that done, and ultimately did get the contract signed with the Hurricanes. There was a third PTO last year. Grigory Dronov was a PTO for the Hurricanes, and he was a really highly regarded defenseman in Russia, came over from the KHL, actually had been set up initially on a PTO with Arizona, but decided to come to the Canes camp instead. And after a short time in the Canes camp, kind of realized that there was not going to be a place for him with the Hurricanes, so he and the Canes decided mutually that he'd head back to Russia. So that was it for Dronov. So, of the 3 last year, 2 signed. That's great. This year we've got 7, and I guess you take a look at that and say, who's possible with the Hurricanes? Well, first things first, we need to talk about the situation for the Hurricanes in their 2 exhibition games on the 29th. So, they will need 40 players, that's 20 in each game, and they all need to be under contract. The challenge the Canes had was they only really had 33, 34 players under contract, so they needed to shore that up, and the way they could do that was with the PTOs. You take a look at the PTO list, obviously a number of these folks will not be a part of the Hurricanes and will not receive contracts. Right off the bat, Cory Conacher, he's been out of the NHL for 3 years, last year in Europe. He's not going to be with the Canes. In fact, he's already signed a deal with the Chicago Wolves. Another Chicago Wolf from last year, that would be Brendan Perlini. He only played 25, 30 games last year with the Wolves. He's not going to be a factor this year. He may very well end up back with Chicago. Nick Shore, he's not going to be doing anything as far as the Canes are concerned. He was with the Kings for a while, but he's not a factor anymore. Been playing in Europe a bit. And then Jayden Halbgewachs, he's a guy that you've never heard of, I'm sure. Drafted by San Jose. He actually was a prospect for them. They looked at him as a potential prospect at different points. He played a few games here and there. Small player, 5'9", probably 165, 75 pounds. Got some skill, came out of the junior ranks, looked like a decent player. So he's another guy that not sure where he's going to go, but it certainly won't be the Hurricanes. And then you take a look at the guys that I think are interesting for the Hurricanes, and that would be, of course, Zach Aston-Reese, Keiffer Bellows, and Nathan Beaulieu. So let's talk about those guys. Aston-Reese, I think, is the most likely to have an opportunity with the Hurricanes. He's a late add to the PTO list. Of course, he played in Toronto last year. Aston-Reese, free agent signing by the Penguins in 2017. He had come off a tremendous year in Hockey East and had won a number of awards. All-Star. He was a Hobey Baker finalist. He was just a tremendous player for them, and he had an outstanding career in college. So the Pens really thought he would be a player. He checks in at 6'1", 195 pounds, so he's a good-sized guy. Can skate and plays a hard defensive game, and of course he was showing offense at that time. But the struggle that he's had, honestly, over the last 5 seasons has just been playing. He's been injured a lot. He's only averaged less than 60 games a year, so that's not been great. Now, last year was great for him. He actually started on a PTO with the Leafs and signed with them. Had a pretty good year. He scored 10 goals. He was a solid fourth-line guy. He can play center, the wing. I think Aston-Reese is that kind of guy that Could fit that fourth line for us. Could be another like a 13th forward for us. Versatile guy, and he likes to play hard. He likes to get in on the forecheck. I think that would be key, and he's a guy that we want to take a look at for sure. He is a serious potential Cane. Keiffer Bellows. I want to talk a little bit about Keiffer Bellows. This guy, when he came up, he was a very top pick for the Islanders in 2016. He was 19th overall. He was a guy that they really thought had potential. Now, his father, Brian Bellows, was a big scorer. You might remember with the Minnesota North Stars and others back in the day. He was a great player, and his son had some of the same characteristics, most notably a great shot. So he's a solid player. He checks in at 6'1" and 195. He plays both wings. He's a guy that he plays hard. He likes to get in, play hard. He definitely is a guy that has the ability to forecheck and get in and make things happen. And that's something that's attractive to the Hurricanes. Of course, that's the way the Canes play. But he struggles a little bit with his skating. He's not the quickest guy, and I think that's something that's held him back as well. But clearly a guy that had a lot of talent when he came in, has just not been able to get it done. The last couple of years have not gone well for him. He was actually waived by the Isles last year, picked up by the Philadelphia Flyers, and then they waived him twice. So clearly he was not a guy that Tortorella was lining up with. When they got him, they thought, hey, this guy could be a scorer. He was a high draft pick, but he just has not been able to put it all together. So ultimately he was not re-signed by the Flyers, and that's why he became available this year as a young man for the Hurricanes. We'll see what he does. Again, he has some offensive capability. He plays a hard game. He likes to get in on the check. He likes to make things happen. But, he just has not been able to put it together, and that's going to be the question as to whether they think he has an opportunity there. And then wrapping it up is Nathan Beaulieu. Beaulieu was a first-round pick in 2011 with the Montreal Canadiens. And, again, he was a guy that 17th overall, good pick. The Habs really liked him. Big guy, 6'2", 200, 210. Definitely a guy that could command the ice. Solid in his own zone, can skate. Really looked like he was going to be a top defenseman, can play both sides equally as well. And, a little bit of an edge to his game. He looked like, as I say, he could be a player. But, it's just not gone that well for him. He's... as you see here, he's done 11 seasons. He's played 471 games, so he's played a lot in the NHL, but he has not been able to put it together. And even last year, he had a real shot with the Anaheim Ducks, and again, continued his kind of play. He's a solid defenseman. He's not spectacular. He's not particularly great with the puck, but he can hold his own in his own zone. He can keep the crease clear. And he's capable of making a difference. Now, I would have seen him as a defenseman that we would put on a two-way deal, have him available in the farm system, down at the farm team in the AHL for injury's sake. But, the situation is tough with us not having an AHL affiliate this year, so I'm not sure if that's possible. But in any case, we'll see what happens with Beaulieu and the rest of the PTOs as things take place here in the Hurricanes camp coming up. So, yeah, kind of interesting. If you look around the league, a lot of action on the PTO front. Of course, a lot of that's been driven by the cap situation. Last year, there were 42 PTOs that were put out there, 11 signings. So, a good number, 25%, pretty good. This year, there have been 48 PTOs. And we'll see what number gets signed as well. And I'm sure it'll be something around the same, 10 to 15 PTO signings. So lots going on. In fact, if you look at the guys that I really think have a shot, there's a group that I've been looking closely at and kind of led by Danten Heinen, who's signed with Boston on a PTO. Of course, he used to play for the Bruins. He's had a good run with Pittsburgh. This guy's scored some goals. He's had a couple of 16, 18 goal seasons. He's a good sized player. He checks in at 6'1", and about 195 pounds. So he's a good sized player as well. He can skate. He's got a lot of capability. I think he's got a real shot with the Bruins, particularly given their situation of needing some additional offense this year. I think he could be a good add. And then again, you've got Max Comtois. Comtois was a guy that I was surprised was not re-upped by the Anaheim Ducks this year. Comtois, to me, was a player with some potential. Like, he came in, I think his second year, he got 16 goals. He can fly down the wing. He's got some great offensive instincts. He's a good-sized guy. Could make things happen. So I was surprised that he was made available. But he heads off to Vegas. I think that's going to be a good place for him. Bruce Cassidy, kind of coach that could really develop him. And I think there's a real opportunity for Comtois coming up. I also wanted to mention Nick Ritchie. Ritchie is on a PTO with the St. Louis Blues. Brother, actually, Brett, is on a PTO with the Florida Panthers. Interesting. Nick, he's a big guy, 6'2", 230. He's not particularly quick, but he has had some success on the power play. A couple of years ago, went to Arizona, was in Arizona, and first 24 games with them, he scored 10 goals. I think a lot of them on the power play. But he's a guy that he can make things happen in the offensive zone. He's able to command space because of his size, and he's had some success. I think clearly with St. Louis, he's going to get a real shot. They can use some additional strength up on the forward lines, and I think Ritchie will get a good look by the Blues. A lot of PTOs out there, so we're going to have to follow it, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of signings to finish off training camp this year. Anyway, thanks again for joining me. As always, please subscribe. I look forward to any comments down below, and we'll look forward to catching up with you soon right here on stormTRacker.